The European sky was crowded with machines and men. The battles were brief, brutal, and often over friendly land. The Pacific? That was a void. It was a theater of war so vast, so unforgiving, that the true enemy was not the Zero fighter, but the ocean itself. This is the uncut story of the air war that broke men and machines. In 1942, the American pilot was fighting an impossible fight. They flew the Wildcat, a sturdy but slow defender, against the infamous Japanese Zero. The Zero was faster, lighter, and could turn on a dime. Early in the war, if an American pilot engaged a Zero in a classic dogfight, they were already dead. We celebrate the few who survived, but we rarely discuss the brutal attrition rate, where entire squadrons were wiped out in days, leaving the survivors psychologically shattered. The real killer was distance. Imagine an American bomber crew flying 8, 10, sometimes 12 hours over nothing but water. They faced not just enemy fire, but the terrifying isolation of being thousands of miles from the nearest friendly runway. If your engine failed, if your navigation was off by a single degree, or if you were shot down, your fate was sealed. The ocean did not take prisoners. This psychological pressure cooker, day after day, year after year, pushed even the toughest pilots to their breaking point. The war in the Pacific was a battle of engineering and sheer industrial volume. The Japanese had brilliant pilots, but they could not replace their losses. The Americans? They built a machine that would dominate the sky, the F-6F Hellcat. Its genius wasn't its speed, but its sheer resilience and power. The Hellcat was designed to take a beating and still bring the pilot home. This technological shift turned the tide, but it cost hundreds of young pilots their lives in the bloody transition. The aircraft carrier was the true battlefield of the Pacific. It was a floating air base, a massive target, and a death trap for those who missed the landing wire. A carrier landing was not a landing, it was a controlled crash. In heavy seas or under fire, a pilot had less than 10 seconds to hit a tiny moving deck. The pressure was so intense that many pilots later confessed they feared landing more than combat itself. The cost of failure was instant death, either by fire or by being swept into the propellers. The most brutal innovation of the Japanese was the kamikaze. This wasn't just a military tactic, it was a psychological weapon designed to shatter American morale. Imagine being a gunner, watching a plane deliberately dive directly into your ship. It defied all logic of survival. The kamikaze attacks turned every flight, every patrol, every moment on the deck into an adrenaline-laced nightmare. We view the kamikaze as an act of fanaticism, but for the American sailor and airman, it was a terrifying, rational certainty of death. This constant exposure to extreme violence and the loneliness of the Pacific sky led to a crisis. Operational fatigue, or what we now know as combat stress and PTSD. Pilots were not rotated out. They flew mission after mission until they physically or mentally broke down. The military often dismissed these men as cowards, but the truth is, their minds simply ran out of room for fear. We honor the aces, but the real story is the thousands of pilots who flew 40, 50, 60 missions, the anonymous heroes whose sanity was the ultimate price of victory. The latter half of the war was dominated by one machine, the B-29 Superfortress. This was a flying fortress of unprecedented scale, capable of flying higher, farther, and carrying a heavier load than any bomber before it. Its mission? To flatten the Japanese mainland. The B-29 raids were arguably the most brutal aerial campaign in history. Flown out of distant bases like Saipan and Tinian, these crews faced unimaginable conditions. They flew at extreme altitudes, 30,000 feet, where the cold was sub-zero and mechanical failure meant a rapid, terrifying plunge. Then came the change in tactics. Low-altitude firebombing. General Curtis LeMay shifted the B-29s from high-altitude precision bombing to terrifyingly low-level firebombing raids over Japan's wooden cities. The firebombing of Tokyo on the night of March 9, 1945, was a single-night slaughter that surpassed the immediate death toll of both Hiroshima and Nagasaki. LeMay ordered the removal of defensive guns to pack more bombs. The pilots flew through the smoke of a city being burned alive. This was the grim, uncompromising, and ultimately necessary brutality of total war. This shift wasn't a choice. It was a calculation that to save American lives, they had to destroy the enemy's capacity to fight, block by burning block. The men who flew the Pacific Vortex returned home to silence. Unlike the ground battles, the trauma of the air war was internal and isolating. They had seen things no man should see: planes exploding in mid-air, men disappearing into the endless blue, and entire cities reduced to ash. The air war over the Pacific was a relentless proving ground for technology, tactics, and the human spirit. It accelerated the jet age, it created the backbone of the modern U.S. Navy, and it demonstrated the horrifying, decisive power of air superiority. But the legacy is not just one of victory, it is one of profound moral cost. The pilots and crews were the ultimate executors of strategic destruction, and they carried that burden alone. They were the ones who flew the long, lonely path from the Wildcat to the superfortress. They pushed the limits of their machines and their sanity to achieve an unconditional victory. The ultimate truth is that the Pacific sky was a silent, unending vortex that consumed not just metal and fuel, but the innocence and peace of every man who flew in it. Subscribe now and hit the bell for more unflinching history. Next time,